What up, guys? Today we got a question from Lee, who's a white belt who's no longer at the bottom of the pecking order. He's been about a year in training, and so he's getting pretty good, and he's able to get the better of a lot of the newer white belts. Right? That's a great thing. He has a question about rolling with them, though. He says that when he's rolling with these brand new white belts with less than a few months of experience, he's able to get the better of them. Besides being a more experienced white belt, he's also a bigger guy. He's about 215 pounds, and so he's wondering, should I allow them to work a little bit, which is kind of what he does now. Lets them get sweeps and stuff on them, and so they can play a bit. He says, or should I just roll like normal and just go after him? Because he's wondering too, if I allow them to work, am I being a good partner, or am I just being overconfident and maybe arrogant about it? And so he's wondering, what my philosophy is with rolling with brand new people or people with less experience and how that whole thing goes. So Lee, thanks for the question, brother. So I will share with you how I go about rolling with less experienced people to get the most from it, both from the standpoint of helping that person, but also helping myself and making myself better. Because here's the deal. You could roll with that person and just do your normal roll and smash them every single time to oblivions, right? Oblivion. Smithereens. I combined two words there. Word vomit. But you could smash them over and over again, right? And you're really not going to get that much from it. There will be something you get from it. And they're probably going to quit, right? Because this is like something, I think I was reading one of Jordan Peterson's books. I know, me saying that name, some of you guys are going to get your rash guards in a bunch. But listen, I like what some of the stuff the guy says, and then some of the stuff I don't like what he says, right? I don't like what anybody says, even myself sometimes, 100%. But he was talking about a study they did on rats, and he was talking about the fact that mammals just play, right? And they wrestle. Everything from rabbits to rats to bears to humans. And they wrestle play. And what they found was that when these rats would wrestle with each other, there would be the bigger, more dominant rat. And when it would wrestle with the little smaller rat, occasionally what they would notice is that the bigger rat would allow the smaller rat to pin it. And they noticed it because what would happen is if the bigger rat won every little play time that they had, the smaller rat would stop coming to the bigger rat. He's like, I don't want to play with this guy anymore, right? But if the bigger rat allowed the smaller rat to win occasionally, the smaller rat came around. Every now and then it got to win, so I was like, oh, this is fun. Let's do this again. So when we roll with smaller people, that can be an inherent benefit. Besides our own skill, there can be an inherent benefit of helping people stick around to want to come train, right? So if you're rolling with someone, instead of just crushing them every single time, you allow them to work and you allow them to feel a little success and feel like they're making progress, right? And again, you're not necessarily doing this falsely because, again, you make sure their technique is correct. You make sure they're doing the right movements and everything's correct. You don't just let them you don't just flop over for them. So it is actually helping them make them better because they get a feeling to do something against resistance. But again, that's a cool thing because now you're helping this person stick around. Well, why is that significant? Well, think about it this way. When I was a black belt, just as an example, when I was a black belt training at my gym, I had to use the strategy that I'm going to talk about in a second because I had blue belts to train with. That's all I had was blue belts. Maybe a purple belt here and there. I would have a random black belt sometimes. But essentially when I started as a black belt at my gym, I was the top dog and I didn't have a whole lot of high-level training partners. Now, at this point, many of the people in my gym are black belts and many of them I trained. Now they catch me in submissions and all that stuff. Like just the other day, I was rolling with one of my black belts, Ben, who's one of our MMA coaches, and he caught me at a damn Darce, right? Good job, Ben. When Ben first came in, I just got my black belt when he got his blue belt, right? So again, I'm training my training partners. I made them and helped them, so now I've got great training partners all the time. It's great. So again, you can think about it this way. You as being at the level you're at, you can start helping some of these guys out because it'll give you good training partners down the road. It's going to benefit you down the road anyway. Now, for purely selfish reasons, let's talk about that, right? Why would this be beneficial to train in a certain way? Well, think about it this way. If you go into the roll with them and you just smash them every time, besides the fact that they're just going to get discouraged, they're not going to make much skill gain their own selves, you're probably not going to make as much skill gain as you could. Sure, you could smash them and you could get better at certain aspects of your game, but what you could do is you get very deliberate. So here's an example of what I mean. When I'm rolling with a lot of the lesser experienced people, especially the people that are like, I know I can just do whatever I want to with them, I give myself very specific moves that I'm trying to work on or very specific tasks that I'm trying to work on, and I try to go after that every single time. So as an example, recently when I was working on mount, what I would do is I would get to this mount position where basically both arms are trapped, the person's on their back, they're dead to rights, they're ready to be submitted, and that's it. And then I would essentially guide them through a little bit in the beginning to help them understand how to get out of this position. And then they would escape, and I would allow them, as long as they're doing good technique, to fight with them, and then they would sweep me. right? As long as they were doing good technique, I would make sure that was in place. Now, once they would get on top of me, I would then escape and I would work back to a good guard position. I would go for a very specific sweep. Once I was on top, I would go for a very specific pass. And then once I was on top, I would go to mount and go for this very specific position, being very intentional about going for this thing over and over and over again. And then once I was on top, I would let them work a little bit, right? Again, a little bit of give and take. And this is what I did with my white belts back in the day. I would allow them to work a little bit. And my blue belts back in the day, I would allow them to work a little bit so that was helpful to them. So they felt a little success and they got a chance to actually play the game. But also, too, I got to actually work on something specific and be very deliberate with my training. And see, this is something you have to think about, Lee, because where you're at right now, you're at that point where you not very long ago were at the bottom of the pecking order, right? Now you're not there anymore. And you have to be careful because your ego can get the best of you and it can just be like, hey, I can smash people now, and you just go smash people all day long, right? And it can do that. But you can also say, you know what? I now have the chance to be very intentional with my training because now I can roll with these people that aren't as good as me and I can actually practice. And that's really the magic. As you get better in jiu-jitsu and that pool of people that you're better than grows, you have the ability to play a lot more and you have the ability to experiment a lot more and you have the ability to be very deliberate. When you're going with someone that's better than you, you're typically reacting. You don't have the ability to be proactive on everything you're doing, right? You're having to respond to them because they're better. Well, now you have the ability to play around with things because, you know, if you see a technique, for instance, you have a bit of a skill buffer where they're not going to be able to just shut it down like that. And you can actually play with techniques and improve techniques. This is why you'll hear many coaches talk about you should roll with less experienced people. It's not because you're there to smash them. It's that you're there to practice techniques and be very intentional with them. And because their skill level is lower, you're lowering the bar. You can think of this as your 1 rep max on a bench press, just as an example of a lift, which you may or may not hit on any given day because it's your 1 rep max, right? Well, if we lower it to 70%, that's our working area. We can hit those reps and we can always get some reps in with 70%. You can think of it this way. Let's say that, you be right at that blue belt level. That's your 1 rep max. On any given day, you may get smashed by those people. Maybe you'll do a little smashing. But if we go down to that 70%, we go down to some of those less experienced white belts, then we can play around with it. We can really work in that range and it's a lot more forgiving. So again, that is my idea to you. Do what you're doing. Let them play a little bit. Just make sure that while you're letting them play, they're doing good technique. Maybe you guide them a little bit sometimes with the technique if you notice something in particular or ask a coach for help. And then also make sure that when you're rolling with them, besides just letting them do stuff, make sure you have something specific to work on, to have a specific goal to work on. So this way you get something from the roll as well. So Lee, thank you for the question, brother. Hope that helps. Talk to you guys next time.